Soufrière on the island of St Vincent is the most active volcano in the Eastern Caribbean, having had 5 eruptions in historical time in the last 300 years, 4 of which have been explosive. The eruption in 2020 began on 27th of December and started by producing a lava dome, which you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner, right next to the much larger lava dome in 1979 in the crater. The eruption remained effusive until the beginning of April, when the explosive activity began with 9 on the 9th of April, and there were 32 explosions, which continued until the 22nd. We were able to visit St Vincent on just 5 days after the end of the explosive activity to document the explosive products. Here, this photograph in the top right here shows the typical sequence. We were able to define 6 units within the tephra fallout sequence. You can see 4 of those here. Unit U1, which is lapilli, U2, which is more ash-rich, U3, which is again more lapilli-rich, and then ash-rich. So you can see that the tephra units from the April 2021 sequence are very much an alternating sequence of lapilli ash-rich layers. Each unit probably represents several explosions. You can see this crudely stratified nature even within the unit's coarser lapilli layers. We were able to construct isopack maps for at least 3 of these units, and also a total isopack, which allowed us to constrain volumes of the different units and also the overall explosive phase. The sequence, as you can see here, the Windward sequence is pretty much the downwind zone, coarsest and also the thickest areas on the northeast side of the volcano. You can see the different units up to U5 exposed very nicely. In terms of timings, we've been able to, using satellite imagery, contemporary satellite imagery at the time, and the distribution of the plumes, tie in the different units which we've identified at these first 3 different units. So you can see this is seismicity, so this is real-time seismic amplitude at the top here. Onset of activity just here on the 9th of April. Obviously unit U1, which is the lowest unit, started at 8:41 local time. And then unit U2 at 4:50 in the morning, based on the satellite imagery, and then unit U3 probably later on the 10th. We can also use satellite imagery to constrain this as well, and it would appear that unit U1 was associated with the crater formation and destruction of the 2020-2021 dome, and also part of the 1979 dome. And you can see from this fantastic radar image that 600-meter crater which was in existence by 2 p.m. on the 10th of April. In addition to that, we can provide some constraint on the pyroclastic density currents which are formed. The observatory 12 kilometers to the southwest was in darkness for the first 48 hours of the explosive activity. Consequently, we need remote observations to be able to work out exactly when pyroclastic density currents are onset. And you can see this image show you that there were pyroclastic density currents to the southwest starting on the 11th, and we think this is probably broadly coincident with the unit U3 layer for reasons I'll mention in a moment. So pyroclastic density currents were relatively minor in comparison to other eruptions like 1902, perhaps more similar to 1979 activity. You can see the pyroclastic density currents in red. They reached the sea in 2 valleys, the Larakai, which drains the lowest point of the crater rim, and the Roseau Valley down here. And they came about halfway down the Wallaby Valley, and there were some minor pyroclastic density currents on the upper southeast flank. And you can see the pyroclastic density currents deposits overlain by some eruptive lahars on the mouth of the Larakai Valley, and here also in the Roseau. This is the 13th of April. The other thing you'll notice is there's really no evidence for energetic low concentration pyroclastic density currents associated with these events. We also see tephra fall deposits rich in accretion lapilli. This is the unit U6 on the southwestern side. We think these correlate with ash plumes associated with where pyroclastic density currents perhaps were reaching the sea, moisture-rich pyroclastic density currents generating these accretionary lapilli fallout layers. In terms of components, we see a range of components which are present pretty much throughout the whole sequence. And again, the grain size that you can see from these histograms, you can see that the lapilli layers obviously ash poor, whereas we can see more ash rich layers here. The components, in terms of the components which are obviously important for understanding the mechanisms, we see both vesicular, pale scoria, semi-vesicular, and a range of types, material possibly representing dome material, dense fragments with no vesicles at all and free crystals, and a minor component of hydrothermally altered material. Here's some images to show you those vesicular scoria, dense class here, rich in microlites, and then this range of types of semi-vesicular class, which are probably formed by a range of different processes. A little bit more detail, you can see that again, the different components here remain present throughout the sequence. So even the lowermost unit here has vesicular scoria, but that vesicular scoria is a minor component and increases rapidly upwards. And that increases actually at the expense of the semi-vesicular material. So we think that at least some of the semi-vesicular material represents the dome material, which must have been destroyed in the early parts of the explosions on the 9th of April. In terms of volumes, we can constrain reasonably well from using isopacks on island. Obviously, there's a huge uncertainty associated with what's going on out to sea. But we know from the images of the crater that there's a similar volume of material inside the crater, and some of that will be pyroclastic density currents, of course, but also we've got pyroclastic density currents in some of the valleys, as I mentioned, but there is a huge uncertainty on those volumes. However, our estimates at the moment indicate that probably overall there's a bulk volume of about 1 times 10 to the 8 cubic meters, which puts us in probably a low VEI4, possibly high VEI3 volume. So in conclusion then, we can see that the explosive activities produce deposits which switch between lapilli and ash-rich phases. We think the mechanism for this might be related to some kind of fluidization in the vent region, which is modulating the style of activity generating these ash-rich phases. And there was minor low-energy PDC activity late on the second day of explosive activity, but this continued as the explosions, smaller explosions, occurred towards the end of the sequence.